wooden boats were on their way to going extinct in the mid-60s. I mean, that was the momentum. So I just thought, damn it, I want to do something about this. These boats are too great. I thought I might find, really, I thought a few thousand, but maybe 10,000 people who would feel about this the same way I did. I grew up in Kingston, a small village really in southern Rhode Island where the University of Rhode Island is. The university was my kind of playground as a kid. And then in the summers, my mother's family had an island in the Thimble Islands in Connecticut. And that was where I found my heart's home on the water and around boats, which when I was a kid were only wooden boats. There was nothing else. There was chaos in my house, but the island was a place where there was no chaos. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother had mental health issues. And so it's ironic that the solid ground I found was the water. I was the youngest of the three of us. My brother was 8 years older than I, and my sister was 5 years older than I. I wasn't exactly neglected, but I think by the time I came along, my parents were on to other things. We weren't really a family. I just had to find my way, find my place myself, because it was clear that nobody else was going to. My mother had mental health issues, I think in part caused by trying to figure out how to be a wife and mother in a house where the man she had married, a Yale PhD English professor, was unreliable, untrustworthy, entertaining when he was sober, frightening when he was not. I think my mother didn't know how to deal with that, and she became diagnosed as a schizophrenic. I had grown up on the island during the summer months, so from the time I was born, I was there whenever my family was there. It was a place I could be myself without worrying about what was going to happen next, what was going to explode next. In a way, I think I was always lost. In a way, because I think, it was hard to know where I fit in my family. There just wasn't anything to kind of count on. There wasn't anything to hold on to. The most emblematic of my early being on a boat experiences would have to be when I would ride on the ferry from the shore to our family's island. Yeah, I think, why don't you just back her off, and then we'll want to put her ahead. But I can still feel the lines leaving, being pulled in from the float, and the boat beginning to accelerate slowly, and the squat of it, and the kind of slight roll of it. That became the experience that I saw. Maybe it's like the first time you take a drug, and it's like the high is the thing that you seek for the rest of your life, trying to duplicate that same high. It was probably like that for me, the feeling of, holy smokes, wow. This is the moment when we just get underway. I gotta put a rubber gasket on that vibrator. I don't know what's going on, maybe dry? beautiful.
Surprising.
I rode on this boat from the time I was probably before I could talk. This ferry in the Thimble Islands in Connecticut where I grew up. And so every experience that I had on this boat sort of became built into the previous experience. So before I had any cognition of what I was doing, it was building in me. So that, I'm sure, had a lot to do with how much the water meant to me, because it was a place of peace. Even when it blew hard on the water, it was a place of peace. Feel her go, feel her go. On the other hand, the household was pretty chaotic. I used to have to do these chores. So one day I was clipping a barberry hedge, the worst job that my mother could give me on a spring Saturday. Just a despicable job in my view. My doing that yard work was what caused the person from across the street at the fraternity to come over and invite me over for lunch. Perhaps these guys sensed that the father wasn't in the home. Perhaps they sensed that my mother was in a fragile state. I don't know what it was. It was just completely innocently generous and loving in a way. And thank God, as I grew, mentors appeared just in time for the next phase. And that I think is why I'm functional and successful today. That those mentors made a huge difference in my life. When I dropped out of college, I took a motorcycle trip across country with a friend. And during that time, I took an interest in LSD and took an interest in the experience of dropping acid. I was pretty drawn into that way of life, but it wasn't feeding anything substantive in me. Mass step? Yeah. Really? Get upstairs. An adjustable one? Yeah. I realized that what I really wanted to do was work on boats, just in order to feed my soul. So I went to work at Dutch Wharf. What would be the distance that would go at the masthead? Whoa. You know, you're moving over a foot, 18 inches. So I just one day made a decision to stop doing acid, period. And what I thought was, I just want to build a few good boats in my lifetime. That's what I thought would happen. That would have been a satisfying life. My intellectual mentor, Peter Anderhagen, he really kind of introduced me to how to make curiosity work, how to learn things. So my friend Peter turned out to be curious about what I was learning as a boat carpenter. And he asked me to describe to him how all these pieces of wood go together and keep the people dry on the inside. And I knew the answer to that in depth. I went on at some length about how you set the keel up, you set the frames up, you put the planks on in a certain way, and all of this, when you finally finish it all, you have this watertight structure. And Peter was really amazed at this, which amazed me because I'm just working at a trade. He's an accomplished intellectual. The discovery for me was that this art, this science, was hugely important. My next big mentor was the man who owned Dutch Wharf Boatyard in Brantford, Jack Jakes, who really appreciated my curiosity at a time when my curiosity was suddenly meaning something to me as a person with aspirations now, whereas I'd been just carried along before. Now I had a way of focusing in a cerebral way on this thing that my heart beat faster for, this thing of boats and the water. I started a small boat shop temporarily in Connecticut, and so I built a couple of boats down there, and then we moved to here to the mid-coast area. During the time that I was completing the last boat that I built, which was for a friend of mine, I realized that what was going on in the wooden boat industry was that these boats were in danger of going extinct, and that I was practicing an art that was itself in danger of going extinct. And what I wanted to do was something, anything, that would slow that process down. So I thought, this is what I must do. I must start a magazine. And starting a magazine, as crazy as that seems, when I think about it now, I mean, I'm a boat builder. It never occurred to me that I should not try this. Because I believed so much in the genius of wooden boat design and especially construction. There was so much I had learned about that genius, and so much more I wanted to learn about that genius, that I thought, if only people knew, if only people understood what is within these boats, they would appreciate it more. I mean, I just hardly thought that it wouldn't work. But again, not because I knew this, but that's what I believed or wanted to believe, that there must be a way to make this work. But it was based on zero science, zero data, just instinct and intuition. When we came here, I thought having a stand of cedar was like having a mine full of gold for me. So it was a great spot, and we had you could go across. Well, there might be maybe this is the place. There was a place where you could go to the head of the cove there, and we kept a little skiff there which we could row and sail, which was nice. So I don't know that this will work, but in fact my guess is it won't. It's too scary. But somehow there was something about us, me anyway, that wanted to live way off the road, way off the grid. And my wife, she was perfectly fine with it, but I might have subjected her to more isolation than she deserved. No power, no electricity, no running water for months and months. When I started the magazine, I literally thought my then wife and I could put it together on our kitchen table. I literally thought that. And it was crazy thinking, but that was what it needed at that time. In order to develop velocity, I couldn't know as much of what could go wrong as could go wrong, because I would never do it. The way oh, it looks pretty tired. Yeah, wow, look at that. It used to be so big. Wow. So I built this with my first wife and a friend back in the fall of '74. This is what we moved to. I'm shocked at how little it is. I can't even believe it. It was 24 by 36, which at the time seemed like a huge cabin to us. Yeah, this is where WoodenBoat was published for the first year. It's set on a granite ledge, which was a kind of a cheap way for people around here to build these houses. That was the way to deal with our inability to afford a concrete foundation. It was all I could afford and get the magazine going. So think of being a young mother with 2 children, and what we have is an outhouse and pitcher pump water. When we were still working in this house, I would get letters from subscribers, and among the letters would be letters from doctors and lawyers and truly accomplished professionals who would say, "My dream is to retire and become a boat builder." That was such a shock to me. As I absorbed it, I realized, so I'm doing something good here. It's legit. It's useful. I don't have to worry about not having finished college. We built a small cabin in the woods because we liked living far off the road. The problem that it created was that the distance from the road to that cabin was so great that we couldn't easily bring electrical power in or telephone, because we had to pay for putting the poles in and bringing the line in, and that was a big expense. And at that time, it was an expense I couldn't afford. So for months and months, because we didn't have phone or electricity in the cabin, and because I needed a phone because I'm a publisher, I had to put a phone on one of the big old white pine trees that were at the edge of the field down on the road in a weather-tight box. It's right here. Well, so this is it right here. Where the bark is broken is where the phone box was. Yeah, that's it. I had done a little bulletin board promotion of the magazine at the Mystic Seaport Small Boat Workshop in 1974. And, photographic prints were on the bulletin board, and some, typewritten description and some index cards you could sign up. 2 people subscribed to WoodenBoat that weekend. And, that was enough for me. I mean, I thought, this obviously that's not a business, but I'm going with it. So when we went to press, our intention was to print 10,000 copies with 2 subscribers. I mean, keep my naivete in mind. So we printed these copies. We introduced it at the Newport, Rhode Island Sailboat Show in September of '74. We sold 200 subscriptions and 400 additional copies, single copies, and we were off and running, although looking back on it, 200 subscriptions. It was a lot for a weekend, but it wasn't really, it wasn't exactly a business plan. I didn't know that I could write when I started the magazine. I had not been trained in any way as a writer. I did not think of myself as a writer. My training was the desire to be heard, the desire to be understood. As I began to be more aware of the ability to put my appreciation for wooden boats into words, I realized that there were things that I wanted to say about these creatures that hadn't really been said, although people have described wooden boats as having a soul for a long, long time. Not to get too existential about it, but what is soul? Where does it come from? It's almost a sentient being. This is a half model of the schooner yacht America, the one for which the America's Cup was named. And it's quite subtle. Quite subtle. There are curves here that are, easy to, you can really feel the subtlety of this hull. This is not a kind of a crude hull by any means. She's very fine and has a lot of subtlety to her. I'm reluctant to try to put words to something that is so kind of woo-woo, but it's like you have this beautiful tree. It's an alive being, and we're extinguishing it, or this expression of it, and we're going to put it into something else. So let's make sure that what we put it into is worthy of this thing having its life taken. Bill Garden carved 3 half models of this yawl he called Water Sprite. It would be very fun to build this. This was never built. It would be very fun to build this and go fast everywhere. She's a 63-footer as designed, and it would be amazing, I think, to sail her. This is Minerva. This is really an exquisite 19th century cutter, one of the most exquisite of the narrow cutters. For me, when a person who loves working with wood shapes those pieces into parts that go into the construction of a wooden boat, that is the restoring of soul to a new structure. That is the creating of soul in a new structure. There's a portrait of my great-grandfather's sloop, the Wild Pigeon, and barely visible in that photograph of the Wild Pigeon is this figurehead, which sits at the stem head underneath the bowsprit and guides her forward. I really love this. And I don't know who made it, but it appears to be from the late 1870s, possibly around 1877. It is just so wonderful. Just the fineness of the detail. Somewhere in here you can see the little nostril on the beak, both sides of this wild pigeon. All of that was carved in, and just exquisite work. I don't talk to my boat like she's alive in that way, but I'm just extremely aware that a lot of love went into the creation, the construction of this boat, and a lot of love goes into the care of this boat. And so that combination of what went into the construction and what goes into the care, that is a sum that is greater than, a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that whole is, to me, the embodiment of the soul of a wooden boat. This is Free Spirit, a Concordia 33. She was designed in 1939 and built in 1948. And a lot has changed aboard her. When I bought her in 1982, her hull was in good shape. Giffey had taken great care of her. He'd done some work on her. But the interior was plywood, very much a weekender / day sailor kind of boat with just little cubbies and no lockers, not many drawers, and a small, simple accommodation plan. Now she has raised panel bulkheads, even though we have electric lighting, obviously. We have kerosene lighting in the event that that's what we want, or we run out of power for some reason. She has a small wood-burning stove, solid fuel stove. It really does work. We can put charcoal briquettes in there. We can put blocks of small scraps of wood. We can put compressed wood bricks that work. And because it's a nice dry heat, provides us with just the comfort level that we want. So these berths, the seat backs fold back up in, and the berths are plenty wide enough. There was a time when my wife and I slept together on one side, and then as we got older, long night comforts became more important. The backs, there are little deadbolts here, and see these hinges, they just hinge back all the way. So I'll just do it part way. So I usually slide the cushion off, but just for the sleeping bag is here. But if it weren't blocking my way, we could fold this all the way back, and that gives all the room that one wants. So, and yet, it's plenty comfortable for using as a settee. And then there are, on both sides, there are these lockers with shelves, and in fact, I just put these shelves in this summer because we were kind of wasting space. We'd have these lockers filled with, they'd be piled with stuff, and you have to kind of dig through it, which we didn't want to do anymore. So, and just simple little stowage places, just to keep things from, if we get into some weather and things get tossed about, I just want them to be, I don't want to be you know, flying all over the boat. So having lockers was important. Having drawers that, you know, locked in place, you know, for all the simple things. All this stuff, you know, we needed to make sure we could keep it tidy. The head, which has, again, it's come through a number of iterations, is pretty simple. In order to make the best use of it, we roll this sink out. So you just release this little clip, and then one can bend over, like, without, you know, one doesn't have to go under here to wash face or something like that. So that's a great thing. The toilet itself is a composting toilet, which was a big decision for us. We don't have many pump out stations here on the coast of Maine, or at least this part of the coast of Maine. It's an inconvenience in some ways, but it feels better than dumping solid waste into the waters that are fragile enough already. So we were glad to be able to make that change. You know, I guess my nature is kind of traditional and modern. So, for example, we have a traditionally turned brass cabin light, but it has an LED bulb in it. I like the feel and look of a traditional fixture, but I want the battery life, the low amperage of a modern LED bulb. And this is my great-grandfather's sloop, which he had bought maybe 1881. And immediately, this might run in the family, but immediately had some modifications made to it. But what's interesting to me is that he held on to the boat for all those years, from the early 1800s until he died. He died in 1923. And so I seem to be, without intending to, following that commitment to a boat in the family, the boat as family member. Anyway, it's just, I love old photographs, I love old boat photographs, so there are a lot of things I would put up in here if I could commit to cluttering the boat up, but I obviously can't do that. So even if I was willing to, Sherry would not be. When I stopped being the editor of WoodenBoat in 1994, I thought that Sherry and I would take off for a year, go voyaging. That was what I yearned for after all these years of trying to make WoodenBoat work. I would retire, or take a longer sabbatical. Just take some time and be on the boat. That was all I wanted to do. The thing about the success of WoodenBoat and a professional boat builder, they were really doing everything that I wanted them to do. But there was something sort of incomplete in me. There was something that I wanted to achieve, that I wanted to express, that I wanted to be the agent of, that was not being expressed in WoodenBoat and or Professional Boat Builder. What I wanted to do was to change the way we saw ourselves and each other. And I returned to that old idea of a magazine that could be about people who were trying to make the world a better place. I think I should have called it Humankind. Instead, I called it Hope. And it would be about people who were trying to do something to ease the pain of others or ease their own pain. What I wanted it to be was about struggle and triumph, or struggle and not triumph, but human beings trying to be in the world and make a difference for themselves or for others. It was an idea that mattered a lot to me, and I thought it would matter a lot to a lot of people. In fact, I thought if WoodenBoat had gotten to break even in 5 years, Hope could get to break even in like 3 years or something like that. That's how perfectly I thought it would. I thought, this is a really good idea, and who can say no to a magazine called Hope? And in 2 or 3 years after Hope was up and running, I and Sherry, my wife, would go voyaging.
All right, this is nice. This is our reward.
Yeah. Once again, we wouldn't mind having that Genoa up instead of the Yankee, but not bad.
We're just going to the boatyard, so it's not.
Yeah.
It's good too. They're doing amazingly well. Look at them.
Yeah.
How are you going to feel when she passes you?
Sherry, honey, I don't know how you can utter such heresy. You know, as if I would be that competitive.
You would just say, go.
Go girl, you go girl. Yeah, you deserve it. It was very difficult I tried to keep Hope going for about 8 years and it didn't work. In the end, I could not find more than 25,000 readers at any given time. And we kind of promoted this to more than 1 million people. More than 1 million people saw the idea of Hope, and many of them said no. And you know, that was something that took me a long time to figure out and took me a long time to accept. Okay, Sherry, I'm going to come around into the wind, okay?
Yeah. She beat us! Robin! You beat us!
So Hope, basically, while it weakened our financial position generally going forward, it also provided me with a pathway into work that I had never, ever thought I would find myself in. This is where my double life is illustrated. On this side are some of my favorite books on the maritime or maritime history side of things. This is all boat, mostly boat related. And in this section is my violent crime victimization and victimizing section. This is all the books that I've read over the years to try and understand something about the people who commit such crimes and the people who are victims of such crimes. These books have helped me learn in this field, which I've been involved in for 16 years. In mid-1999, we decided to produce an issue of Hope that was focused on the different ways that people found to make peace with themselves or with others. And one of the ideas came from a clipping that our research person found. And this clipping was about 2 parents who met and talked with one of the 2 young men who abducted, raped, and murdered their 18-year-old daughter. And I thought, how does anybody sit and talk with the person who's murdered their daughter? So I wanted to talk with the man who had mediated or facilitated the preparation and dialogue process with these 2 parents and the offender. And I asked him the same question. How do you do this? How does the survivor do this? Why don't they just want to kill the guy? And David said, well, we're going to do a training in a few months. Why don't you come down and take that training? It's a 2-week training. Take the training and then, you'll be able to write from an even more informed point of view. So time went by and the training came up and I showed up there on the first day, and by the time we were an hour into it, I knew that I not only wanted to write about it, I wanted to do this. I just caught fire over this. But that training, which lasted 2 weeks, put me in a position where I was then able to take on a victim-offender dialogue case. So I became at the time, they still do call them mediators, but this is not mediation. We're not arriving at some middle ground. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a murder or a rape. It's just, these are horrifically traumatizing crimes. And yet those victim survivors want to address their offenders directly in a safe setting, at the prison generally. That's where these happen. in a way, everything that I had done in WoodenBoat as a writer, as an editor, led up to this work as a listener for victim survivors and for offenders. I think an editor is a storyteller to a degree, but wants to make sure mostly that other people's stories get heard. So for me, I guess what I've realized that I am and have been all along is a facilitator. I want to facilitate the process by which people get heard. That's really who I am, most of all. And it's who I've been. I did a lot of work at the Maine State Prison. And the Maine State Prison inmates knew that I was involved in boats as well as crime victims. And so they made me a friendship sloop as a way of thanking me for my work with them and my work with offenders, with victims, and with wooden boats. And it's kind of a nice emblem of that relationship, those relationships.
Okay. Good one.
Outside the trap. Those who are doing the work at WoodenBoat, they have the autonomy to make the decisions. I've totally invested them with the responsibilities that they have. The people who work here are amazing. They are all capable, and they don't need me. It's not that. I just want to be able to be sure that I'm here enough for them. So that can be hard. Because I'm in both places. My heart is in both places, and in fact,
Robin, see if she steers.
when I return home from casework, which is mostly out of state, or trainings, which are all out of state, I come back somewhat wounded by the heartbreak of working in those cases. And here's the place that I heal. WoodenBoat, this body of water, is the place that I heal. Going out on Free Spirit is the place that I heal. Sitting in my house, looking out the window with my beautiful wife, is the place that I heal. All those things are part of the journey that I'm on, but it's not a simple one. I mean, I would have liked this part of my life to be a lot simpler, and it's not. And I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's not so easy to follow your heart when your heart has two branches. So it's complicated for me. That's a hard thing for me. But it's made a huge difference in my ability to feel like I have done something, like I have achieved something, like I've accomplished something, like I'm okay. It's okay. I'm leaving the world a little bit better place. That matters to me.